Hello, Leslie Baez. Nice to have you.
Hello.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So we're going over the first assignment. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and share the page. And have you had a chance to watch the video that I've put up so far on the Aztec?
Yeah, I just haven't finished it. So
Okay,
I started it.
great. Yeah, because to be honest, there's not a whole lot that I'm going to add to that.
Okay.
But I just want to make sure we're on the same page as far as my expectations of the assignment. Um, let's see here. One thing to keep in mind, though, I'm going to go ahead and share the page here.
Okay.
Is I will be happy to put this PowerPoint up if it helps at all. But this is a Native American PowerPoint that I've done for my U.S. history class, and just to give us context to this assignment. So Shanice, nice to have you. Let's see here.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you. Here's something to think about. Okay, is the Spaniards in 1519 are going to come into Mexico, and within 2 years they're going to conquer the Aztec Empire. Right? They're going to largely use these 5 criteria to justify their conquest. For one, right, is they're going to contend that these are barometers or measuring sticks for civilized status. And they had people called jurists who were interpreters of the law, and they would actually write legal justifications for conquering, especially non-Catholic, non-Christian civilizations in the early modern era of the 1500s. And so for one, right, is also you find a correlation with anthropology, right, with cultural anthropology, whereby they believe that there's somewhat of a pattern of human development and cultural development, and it kind of plays into it. And so for one, right, is that there's this assumption that mankind, one of the first accomplishments culturally for mankind was to manipulate the landscape, namely farming, right? They call it the Neolithic or the farming revolution or the new stone tool revolution. And you find it elsewhere in the world. Like, let's see here. To give you like a sense of comparison, 3000 BC, the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, the Egyptians about 3000 BC, in the Indus Valley of India, in the Yellow River of China, 4000 BC. And so you have evidence of that. And they're going to put American cultural developments into these categories. The Paleolithic era, and that was the era in which you have the mega fauna hunters, the big animal hunters. So we have evidence of that, like here in the Americas, like with this giant sloth and these other extinct animals that we've excavated and have found evidence of human beings being contemporaries with them and hunting them. And the famous ones are like the Folsom and Clovis found in New Mexico, tip points, spearheads. So you have evidence of that. But going back to this with manipulation of the environment, it's an assumption that mankind finally got to a point where they could sustain a large population. The idea is that when you traveled as a hunter or gatherer, following the animals, you couldn't sustain a large population. You didn't have the time and means to develop literature and art, etc. This is all arguable, okay? It's just an argument that's been very salient. It really stands out in early modern through modern Western. And when I say Western, I mean mainly Europe and the United States, Western kind of ethnocentric view of things, how we perceive them. And so what we contend is that there was first manipulation of the environment. And so there was first farming. And so they think that like teosinte was one of the first wild grasses that was they made a hybrid of and turned it into corn. And so it was a human innovation. And in doing that, right, when you're able to farm and produce a crop or more, and of course with the Americas, right, with back in the old world, a lot of time it was some derivation of wheat, in China, rice, and with the United States and the Americas, Northern, Central, and Southern America, it was the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. So they look for evidence of that, and they have evidence that as early as 4000 BC, they have evidence right here of corn. So maize, right, is a hybrid, and they grew beans, squash, manioc, peppers, tomatoes, potatoes, cassava by as early as 4000 BC. And what you have to keep in mind is for one, is why did the Native Americans have to play this game to begin with, right? Why did they have to contend that we met your criteria for civilized status at an early date? And if they cannot prove it, then they're somehow unworthy of possessing their own land, and they could be, legally dispossessed. And so, first of all, why should they even have to play that game? And secondly, it's important to remember that the Americas are isolated by the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, so they can't piggyback off of other societies, civilizations. We're going to get to that when we get to the Spanish. The Spanish are going to piggyback off of many other civilizations and have that luxury that the Native Americans did not. So at any rate, you have, and then of course you have dabbling like with architecture, making some type of megalith, some big building of some sort that's lasting. Those types of things, right, as far as manipulation of the landscape. So they were impressed, needless to say, with the Great Pyramids that the Mesoamericans had constructed. Then also a capacity for a large, complex settlement. That goes hand in hand with farming, right? And the farming revolution is the idea is once you could grow a lot of food, you could sustain a large population in one spot. And so you can create cities and these civilizations of people staying in the same spot. And the complex part, right, is you have a stratified society of multiple classes. Oftentimes the generic classes are farmers, military soldiers, some type of priestly hierarchy of religion. You also have, welcome, Miguel. You also have, let me put Miguel's name down. All right. You also have, where was I? I'm sorry. I was talking about, the different classes. Merchants, right, who trade commodities. And you also have artisans, skilled laborers who make some type, everything from tools and weapons, utensils, textiles or clothing, etc. Right? And so you're able to develop a complex society. And then also at the time, I think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is when you're no longer worried about when your next meal is coming, and you have your basic needs of shelter and food and water taken care of, then you could enjoy things that you didn't have the luxury of enjoying prior to that, right? So you could ruminate on the meaning of life and engage in philosophical speculation. You could enjoy music and create music, art, etc. and then also scientific development, which oftentimes goes hand in hand with technological innovation. And the Europeans, of course, are going to have a leg up in metallurgy and the making of, iron and steel products, and also particularly when it comes to military history, gunpowder. So you have scientific development, technological innovation. Needless to say, the Spaniards were very impressed with the astronomical knowledge of the Mesoamericans, right? As early as the Olmec, the people of Teotihuacan, the Toltec, the Maya, of course, the Maya, and later the Aztec. So then you have religion, and it's the idea, right, that mankind in anthropology has evolved from shamanism, right, where you believe in a duality of the physical and the metaphysical world, and you want to intervene spiritually, and you believe in types of religious beliefs that the modern world sees as superstition. And like I said, please note that this is all very slanted. Okay, this is not my worldview. This is just what we're dealing with as far as Spanish and European justification for taking over the Native Americans. And then you go from there, and then you also have polytheism and a lot of, quote, primitive societies where they believe in multiplicity of gods, of the different elements of the wind, of rain, etc. And you have shamans that try to intervene on behalf of the physical world into the metaphysical realm of the gods and the spirits, etc. And try to, I hate to say manipulate, because that's a negative word, but they try to alter events and ensure that rain comes, that fertility is prevalent amongst the people, etc. And then, of course, you have the evolution toward monotheism, a belief in one God. That's usually tied to a sacred book. And then, of course, cultural evolution, according to anthropology, is, they contend that oftentimes societies have gone past monotheism to atheism, etc., or at least agnosticism, that you can't know if there's a God, etc., and they become more secular. And so at any rate, these are important to remember when you look at this assignment. I think subjectively is the way that the Spaniards are going to perceive the Aztec when they come and see them and when they study them, etc. So speaking of studying them, if you don't mind, I'm going to switch to the assignment. All right. So in studying them, they're going to rely upon a lot of European sources. And so you have to remember that, some people would make the argument that even if you're trying your best to be objective as a European, you arguably possibly can't, even if you wanted to, take off your Eurocentric lens that you see the world through. You were raised as a European, you see the world as does a European, and it's difficult to perceive it through Native American eyes. And so you have the problem in North America with a scarcity of written sources from Native Americans, whereby they have to infer. They have to look at this fact, look at that fact, and try to connect the dots, because there just isn't there aren't a lot of written accounts. But that is not the case with Mesoamerica. In Mesoamerica, they had stelae, Stelai or AE, and the stelae were these megalith, stone monuments that had hieroglyphic writing on them, right, or pictographic writing on them. And they also had the codices. The singular for that is codex. And the codices, right, were literally books that the Aztec and the Maya constructed. And a lot of them, they're fascinating, if I could be honest. I mean, honestly, if you can get your hands on a codex, I'd highly recommend it. They don't have a smooth, necessarily a smooth narration that a Eurocentric book kind of expects. So for instance, when I got my hands on like the Florentine Codex and the Codex Mendoza, oftentimes they were named after the European patrons that paid to have them translated. But when you get your hands on them, it seems a little bit, if I could be honest, from a Eurocentric lens, a little bit all over the place. You might find on the first page a picture of an Aztec parent scolding his or her child for some type of infraction. And then that might be followed by musical instruments, which might be followed by soldiers and what they wore and what they did when they went out to battle. And then in certain parts, you'll find stories like you have the origin story that's famous for the Aztec, right? They're kind of rags to riches story of moving from Aztlan down into the Valley of Mexico. And so it's fascinating. And so what the Spaniards would do, like Bernardino de Sahagún, they would have Aztec noble young men who were taught their language, right? Literacy in their language to translate the codices from Nahua, the Aztec language, into Castilian or Castilian Spanish. And so that we have much from those to glean, thankfully, from Mesoamerica in the case of the Latino people. And I think that's a great fortune for humanity as a whole, but also for Latinos in particular, in knowing their ancestry. So at any rate, a lot of it is gleaned from that. And then you also have more modern scientific methods that they try to employ. They use stratigraphy. They look at different levels of sedimentary layers underneath the ground with the same type of mineral composition. And they can make assumptions and draw conclusions that certain things were contemporaries with one another, that existed and lived at the same time. And they have carbon-14 dating, which is not an exact science by any means, but can sometimes approximate the age of something. And so they have radiometric dating and other methods that, like I said, I would call it inference. None of them are complete in their efficacy of deriving a nice, accurate, certain narrative of what happened when in Mexico. But they do a pretty good job of getting us out of the dark, as do, of course, these codices and the stelae. So at any rate, keep that in mind when you look at this. And then I tried to put things into categories, looking at the codices myself, translated into English. Yeah, and so there we go from here. So you could incorporate the data that you read into one of these three questions. And I apologize, these aren't the most intelligent questions that could have been, organized, but hopefully at least one of them you could run with. So the first one, why should present day Latinos be proud of their indigenous heritage? If you want to go that route. And then glean data from this assignment into why, what makes you feel proud about being Latino from this information. Number 2 option, compare and contrast Aztec society with contemporary American society. And number 3, how do you foresee Spanish Catholic estimation of Aztec society and why? What do you think the Spaniards are going to think of the Aztec in gleaning this information? All right, so You have the origin story, and it's kind of a rags to riches story, right? Where they were deemed as Chichimek, as barbarians, to the people of like Toyan or Tula, and the Toltec and the other more kind of established, if you will, tribes in the Valley of Mexico. Then they fought as mercenaries, as hired fighters for the oh, shame on me, the Tepanek, the Tepanek under Tezosomoc, and they were dealt with harshly according to the narrative in the Codex, and they bid their time. And when the time was ripe, namely Tezosomoc passed away, and there wasn't the same unity and strength amongst the Tepanek, and the Aztec formed an alliance with Texcoco and Tlacopan, and formed the Triple Alliance, and thus arose the Aztec Empire. And so the symbol, right, which Potli, their war god, gave them is found on the Mexican flag, and thus that's why. So a tribute to their Aztec heritage as to the place where they were going to land in Mexico City in Lake Texcoco. And then we get into religion. And so with religion, they believed in 13 heavens and 9 levels of the underworld. A lot of it is very similar to, there was a lot of syncretism, borrowing from one another, just like kind of like the Romans did with the Greeks, with the Maya. If you wanted to look at the different stories of the creation of men, and stories of the gods and all the drama that ensued from jealousies and rivalries amongst the gods of their pantheon, look up Popol Vuh, Popol and then Vuh. That's an interesting source on the Maya. And then, like I said, with the Aztec, it's in a number of codices: Mendoza, the Florentine, the Boccherini, and the Ramirez, several codices about Aztec religion. Quetzalcoatl, to me, I find interesting certain things about this deity that I find similarities with the Christian Christ. He was persecuted by a brother. He sacrificed himself in the underworld to create mankind. Just some very interesting things. He arose from death and from the underworld as the rising star, which to them was Venus. And so Venus was a very sacred planet to the Aztec. And then you have the reality of I don't know about the reality. Let me take that back. But the claim that they attributed human attributes to their gods. The fancy word is anthropomorphism, because a lot of them, they had human vices. Like I said, a big one was jealousy or envy, a will to power and to outdo one another. Revenge is sometimes a salient plot, part of the plots. Yeah. And so they believe that through a mixture of those types of things, right? 4 different times the gods created a species of creation, and they destroyed it. And so they believe that we're presently under the 5th creation, the 5th sun, right? And with that 5th one, I think it's important to remember Nanahuatzin. Nanahuatzin was the god that was very humble. They said that he had very poor skin and a very unimpressive appearance, and was willing to sacrifice himself as the sun, right, for the 5th creation. And so he demanded, according to the codices, that mankind show the same humility and self-sacrifice and passion that he did to keep the sun in its orbit. Because of course, right, everyone at that time believed, including the Europeans, that the sun revolved around the earth and not the other way around. And so I find that another common theme with the Aztec, and I find a similarity with Roman Catholic Christianity is I get to it later on in this assignment, was a high appraisal of humility and sacrifice and self-sacrifice. It almost reminds me of like the Bushido code of the Japanese. You're not to be filled with vainglory like the Macau god, Macau 7, who fell from grace because of pride. And then I don't think I need to remind you of the devil in Christianity, right? And his arrogance and pride and how it brought him low in Christian tradition. And there were different gods that you sacrificed to. There was a goddess, and forgive me for forgetting her name at this present time, but she was the god of sexual vices and filth and like excrement and urine. And it was tied together as filth. And the Aztec people were expected to do penance and bloodlet, cut themselves in certain parts of their bodies to do penance for their sins. There really was something that approximated a notion of sin, which is quite, unique, arguably, with Christianity. And so where I'm getting to with this is that you'll see the syncretism, right? The joining of religious beliefs and practices between the Aztec indigenous religion and the Roman Catholic one that was imposed upon them. And so you have notions of penance and self-sacrifice, humility, the notion told the children that life is going to be hard and you're going to suffer much, and you have to take it stoically, and you have to suffer well, and that the gods will eventually favor you. They'll show mercy upon you when they see your suffering and the dignity with which you are absorbing it. To me, that smacks of Catholic Christianity, at least in the early modern era. And so, so you have that notion. Then with number 4, right, are the famous the famous calendars, right? The 260-day ritual calendar and the 365-day calendar round count of the Maya that the Aztec incorporated. And what's interesting to me too is that it was not just hieroglyphic, right? It was hieroglyphic, like with pictographs, a symbol that symbolizes a word. The idea is, right, is if you use a phonetic by sound alphabet-based language, that it's more versatile, right? You could invent literally a myriad of words to convey a myriad of different things, especially something, that's not necessarily, something that's more kind of esoteric. Like again, I've mentioned, jealousy or envy. How do you make a symbol for that? And so at any rate, what they did is they employed a phonetic part to their language and to their calendar. So they had a pictograph, they had a phonetic sound, and then the third part was a number. And you see here with the numbers, right, is a bar was 5 years or 5, a dot is 1. So you see 2 lines and a dot above it. You see there is 11, right? 5 and 5 and then 1. And then the second level, you make the number and then you multiply it by 20. And then the third level, it's 20 times 20 or 400 and so forth. So a very, very versatile language, impressive to even to the arrogant European colonizers. And you have to remember also is there wasn't the full appreciation for this language because the Mayan code was not cracked until Michael Coe cracked it allegedly in the 1970s. And so it took a long time for Europeans and Western civilization to crack that code. And so at any rate, a lot of that is tied to the 260 days are tied to the crops, they think, and to the position of Venus. And so it's more religiously based and agricultural based. And then the 360 day, it was actually 360 days followed by 5 days of ill omen. That was for taking account a full year, right? And more practical. And so at any rate, yeah, so you have that. And you have the fact, right, that, well, we'll get to that in just a moment. So then, to me, this is just absolutely fascinating. Those of you who read Spanish, by all means, I wanted to hold myself accountable, so I put it in Spanish and English. But I did my best in trying to translate it. My Spanish is not what it once was, but I could read it decently. And so this is my estimation of it. But it's sacrifice of children to the rain god, right? And I find it interesting that the sense of paternalism that the Spanish priests are going to see Native American religion. So you have here, right? I mean, what a strong word right here. Le arrancaba el corazón, right? They ripped out the hearts of these kids and they offered it to the sun, throwing the rest of the body down the grades of steps below, making pieces of them, and then disseminating pieces of the body to eat and cook and eat. But look what he says here. La culpa, the blame for this cruel blindness, this blindness, he calls it, right, in which they're executing the children, should not be imputed upon the cruelty of the parents who with so many tears falling and with great pain in their hearts executed it, but to the cruel hatred of our ancient enemy Satan, who with malignant astucia, it's shrewdness, right, persuaded them to such an infernal deed. So the Spanish are going to look at human sacrifice, right, in a very paternalistic way. Like they are the father figure, and the Aztec are blinded children almost. And you're going to see that type of paternalism, of course, with the missions, right, in California, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and Florida, as well as in Mexico itself. So at any rate, and look at the law code of some of these, right? Virtuous Aztecs are obedient and honest, treating their fellows with respect and showing discretion in their dealings. They were big on modesty also. They were against theft. They were against, unless it were sanctioned on a battlefield, they were against violence. They were against adultery and premarital sex. They were against drunkenness, quite severely so. So at any rate, you see these similarities that are going to dovetail with the Roman Catholic Spaniards when they come. And like I said, their notions of sin and penance, etc. And then, of course, also you have with the amalgamation of these things, is you have the story of Juan Diego and his claim that he saw the Virgin Mary, right, and that his tlaloc, his covering, his shirt covering, to this day it's a mystery to everyone as far as the rose and the insignia that were in his tlaloc that's kept in Mexico City to this day. But that was at a shrine to an Aztec goddess. And so the high estimation of Mary, the Virgin Mary, is no coincidence. in Mexican history and tradition and culture. All right. And so moderation, incorrigible, right? So incorrigible, right? Like corregir. Yeah, you're unwilling to be corrected. They were against stubborn incorrigibility. And they could be severe when the children came of age. And oftentimes, from what I noticed, there seemed to be a strong sense of similarity with Roman Catholic and European notions of adolescence, of reaching puberty and becoming less likely to have people assume that you don't know any better, right? An age of accountability. And so the Aztec had that as well. And as the children progressed in years, 12 years old stands out to me. They began to expect very, very much. Also deference, deference with age, knowing your place and showing respect to your elders. The Aztec were really big on that as well. All right. And then notice this, the judges, if they accepted a bribe, if they showed partiality to the rich, they could be severely punished. And so there was also the notion that as hierarchical as the Aztec society was, there still was a sense of egalitarianism, of putting everyone on equal footing when it came to justice. And that's pretty impressive, especially for back then on any continent. The avenues for mobility, as you could likely guess, because they happen oftentimes the same avenues existed in Europe, were as merchants. If you had a commodity that was highly coveted, oftentimes you could make a lot of money, although you necessarily were not incorporated into the aristocracy. Remember, aristoi in Greek means the best. So the aristocracy was a self-ascribed group that was different and above the rest of the population. But remember, if you're looking for a stratified society, instead of thinking in terms of today and our egalitarianism of putting everyone on equal footing in democracy, it's actually seen in a good light. It was impressive to Hernan Cortez when he saw the majesty of Moctezuma II, right? And how he couldn't be touched. He tried to embrace him. And they said, no, 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 don't touch him. And he was carried on a litter and people dare not look him in the eye, etc. As the Tlatelolni, or he who speaks. And we call him the emperor, right, of the Mexica or the Aztec. And so at any rate, let's see here. So the army, as well as being a merchant, could help you rise in status and wealth and privileges and opportunities and connections, etc., if you fought well in battle and distinguished yourself. And then also religiously, if you were seen to be a pious person and in tuned and have some type of connection with the gods, you could rise up the Aztec bureaucracy. So those tended to be the three avenues of socioeconomic ascension or moving up, were by way of being a merchant, a successful soldier, or a successful priest. All right. But notice they had a dichotomy. They had a school just for the nobility. Oh, from time to time this happens. I have no idea why, but it's going blank on me. That's so strange. I apologize. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to try it again, okay? You'll bear with me. Oh, it's the same. So at any rate, All right, so now we have Carolyn Hernandez. I think. All right. And so going back up to the top questions, are there any questions about what I'm asking of you guys for this assignment? Yes, Miguel.
Nice to meet you, Professor.
Nice to meet you.
Um, I have a question. Well, yesterday, while I was doing the homework, um, I think I'm understanding what you want. It's just for us to read the whole text to understand it and to say why do we feel proud about being Latino. So
Absolutely.
I sent you my homework already. I read the most that I could, and I understand a lot of things. And
Good.
I just want to know. I just want to make sure, like, if you can give me some comments about my work and tell me if it's right or wrong or what am I missing. Because it's actually when I saw the text for the first time, it just gave me a headache because English is not my first language, you know.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh my God, this is gonna be hard. I'm just gonna change it. But then I said, no, I cannot pull back. So I kept going, and it's actually really interesting because it's all about history. And once you start reading it, it's like a story that goes like with the triple aliens and when they went. So there are things that are hard for me to translate in Spanish. I do not know if um Tesosomoc was defeated in a battle or did he die on natural causes.
He died of natural causes.
Oh, so
I'm
that's
almost positive. I'm almost positive he died of natural causes. Yeah.
okay. So that's when the Aztecs make the alliances with the Tlatoacan and I'm sorry, what was that?
The the
Texcoco,
Texcoco. Mhm.
Texcoco and the Tlahuacan. They make the triple alliances, and then they start building the city, or was the city already built?
They began the city in 1325,
13.
and they before they made the alliance.
The
Yeah, they
alliances.
made the alliance. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact year that they made the alliance. I could figure that out for you though. But they
Yeah,
began
I
the
think
city before.
it's gonna be important for me to make like a timeline to get something from this class and just put it on my wall to have some story.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Well, Miguel, thank you for sharing.
You're very
Um,
welcome, sir.
and I tell you what, if there's any time, and I hope that I can make good my boast, okay? But if there's any time that I could give you just kind of a summary and write it in Spanish for you, I'd be happy to. I love to read and write in Spanish.
Oh, for real.
Yeah,
Great
I'm
to
not the
hear.
best, but I'm okay. I'm okay.
Thank you, Professor. I'm not the best either in English, but I try so hard, man.
Yeah, no, I understand.
I'm getting used to it.
So yeah, just keep that in mind, okay, Miguel? Because I like I said, I as you enjoy developing your English, I enjoy developing my Spanish. And so if there's any time that you would like something like that, I would love to do my best in doing that.
Excellent, Professor. Now, I feel very good. We can work together.
Good, as do I, as do I. Okay, and then also, I on the at least the first two assignments, I will not only give you a grade, a number of points out of 50, but I will also write I'll write something to you personal about what I read
Thank you, Professor,
to give you feedback.
to give
Yeah.
me feedback. So, are we having a next meeting this Friday?
Yes. Yes. If that's
Excellent.
okay, I plan to. Yes.
Excellent. Very good, Professor. Well, that was all of my questions. Thank you very much for answering them.
Thank you. Igualmente.
De nada. Hasta luego.
Uh-huh. All right. And so anybody else, does anybody else have any questions or comments? All right. Can I get a thumbs up from someone that you've been able to hear me and you feel pretty good about the assignment and what's expected of you? Thank you, Leslie. All right, I'll take that. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, that's it for today. And yeah, we'll meet Wednesday, Friday this week, and then solamente Wednesday next week. Oh, Miguel, you need to unmute. I'm sorry.
It's gonna be just on Wednesdays.
No, it'll be Monday, Wednesday. It'll alternate, right? Yeah, lo va a cambiar. So I'll do Monday and Wednesday one week, and then just Wednesday the next week, and then Monday, Wednesday again, and then Wednesday the next week.
Lo tengo en mente. Gracias.
All right, por nada. All right, and it's because yeah, what I try to do is stay on pace with your assignments. I want to stay ahead of what's due, but I don't want to go too far ahead. Okay.
Entiendo.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I wish I could meet you in person.
Anytime, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. You guys have a good day.